Thank you.
A determined Chris Walker then as we line up for round 14. The starter points to the lights. We're on board with Walker. Now Walker is famous for his lightning starts. Let's see how he's going to do this time. And we're off. This is the rider's eye view down towards Old Hole Corner, and Walker's certainly made the whole shot, closely followed by Neil Hodgson, and Steve Hislop slotted in there third.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see just how hard Neil Hodgson pushes this time, because he hasn't nearly got the same amount of work to do that he did in round 13, having to ride absolutely out of his leathers for the first half of the race, coming from the back of the grid. He's got away beautifully in second place. It's the number 4 Ducati I'm talking about, and as they head now towards Island Bend, the left-hander, after which will be the steeply banked right-hand Cheloise hairpin, it's number 8 Steve Hislop in third place. There, number 4 Neil Hodgson in second, making fewer mistakes and determined to get a better result this time. Number 3 John Reynolds, and when I said making mistakes, he knows that 5th wasn't nearly good enough, because it dropped him to second place in the championship on 232 points. Hodgson leads the championship on 234, so the championship leader, number 4 Neil Hodgson, in second place. Steve Hislop there, James Hayden number 5 in 5th. Race leader though, Chris Walker, must be thinking hard under that helmet, what the dickens do I have to do this time to keep that orange flying machine behind me?
Well, Chris is very good in early parts of races, not to say he's not good throughout the whole of the race. However, he specialises in getaway good, and he'll know that Neil Hodgson and co are strongly challenging behind him as they come now down to Lodge Corner. Now, tactics play a part in these races. As Ben Atkins there we see, that's John Reynolds' team owner and Roger Marshall team manager, look curiously at the screen, looking to see where their riders are, and they can learn from these pictures as to the tactics employed by the other riders, and then give their riders messages of how to improve. So, as we come streaming through into Druids Bend, a fabulous sight this for the crowd as they come through. Hislop there on bike number 8, and we're on board now with Chris Walker at the front, and that's the view that he's got. Absolutely nobody ahead of him. This is down to the famous Lodge Corner, heavily on the brakes, down to second gear, leaning the bike right over to the right. Mind the back end doesn't step out there. The track drops down a dip, comes through Deer's Leap onto the start and finish. 4th, 5th gear. Now watch Chris Walker here. He doesn't use all the track on the entry point to the corner. That's because he's riding defensively. Chris Walker knows that he can't leave the door open for any of these guys to squeeze past. So there's going to be quite a bit of that in this race. And my prediction is that this race will stay closely bunched.
Well, these 5 are breaking away, but a little mention for the 6th place rider, number 52, James Toseland, having a brilliant ride on the Honda, getting better with every race, the 19-year-old Toseland on the Paul Bird sponsored VTR 1000 SP1. But back at the front, it's Chris Walker on the Suzuki, Ducati Hodgson, Ducati Reynolds, Yamaha Hislop in 4th, Ducati Hayden in 5th, 5 on the bike, 5th in the race. Falston chicane, Chris Walker leads on lap 4. Nearly 30,000 people here at Oulton Park, and the crowds are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And look at the race we've got on our hands now. I somehow think that Neil Hodgson is not under pressure. He's just sitting there watching the back end of Chris Walker. Suzuki has almost through into 3rd place goes Steve Hislop, who is riding really well here today. He loves Oulton Park and always goes well, and maybe even when we get to Knock Hill, which is the next round, of course, formerly home ground for the Scotsman, who now incidentally lives in the Isle of Man, but of course he came from Hoyk, he might even go better. It's a short circuit by the current day standards, nearly as short as Mallory Park, and we are there too quite early on in the second half of the season. But still, it's Chris Walker, number 2. Reynolds now having that tooth and nail scrap for 3rd place with Steve Hislop. But the first 2, Hodgson and Walker, just beginning to break away as out of the action goes Steve Marks from Guildford. Fortunately, he's okay, but he bit the gravel. Marks then back at the tail end, but at the front it's frantic, it's furious. Up to second goes John Reynolds. Second in the championship now, Reynolds. He is very, very keen, and that's an understatement, to claw those 2 points back, and he currently sits in a 4-point superior position. No, he doesn't. Back goes Neil Hodgson, tucking underneath him at Old Hall as they go down the avenue, down towards the left-hander at Cascades. They're at it now. Walker leads, Hodgson and Reynolds in their little scrap. Just look how close they are as underneath Neil Hodgson goes John Reynolds. Masterful riding. Those Ducatis perfectly matched. nothing in it, just that little bit of extra experience possibly with John Reynolds, and then the youthful zest from Hodgson clawing back the place again. So that second place changed hands in about 50 yards. Neil Mackenzie, number 7, Hodgson's teammate, retiring his Ducati, obviously a problem.
Well, that would be disappointing for the team because they pride themselves on reliability. We don't know obviously what that problem is. Now Hayden comes up ahead of Reynolds, so Reynolds was second on that corner on the last lap, and this time he's down in 4th spot. And there we've got a faller. That's Marty Craghill standing in for Peter Goddard, who's on World Superbike duty with the factory Kawasaki team. And that'll be disappointing again for Kawasaki because Steve Plater, of course, out of the action from his practice tumble, but back at the front, and one gets the impression that Neil Hodgson needs a wake-up call. I think he's sat there dozing in that second spot, being mesmerised by the back of Chris Walker's bike, and perhaps needs a wake-up call, and maybe the pit board have told him that his lap times aren't good enough, and we need to be going a bit quicker if he wants to try and win this race. But James Hayden wants to win the race, Steve Hislop wants to win the race, and so does John Reynolds. So we've got a real scrap at the front, and Steve Hislop's lost a little bit of ground at the moment, but at the midway, just over midway point in this race, Hislop can still come back from that distance back if these guys at the front start battling and swapping places.
Well, there's a real ding-dong going on with the two men in your picture, Reynolds and Hayden, the Reve Racing teammates. I won't say there's no love lost, but they both mean business. There are clearly no team orders. In 3rd place, it's number 3, John Reynolds. Chris Walker out in front on the Suzuki, not that far in front because Neil Hodgson means business. Hislop, number 8, hanging on, but they have really broken away now from the rest of the pack. Look at the 3rd and 4th battle. Hayden is going for 3rd, sticks his knee across the front of his teammate and grabs 3rd position. And I said there were no team orders. Clearly there are no team orders. They are really getting stuck in.
Well, I asked James Hayden if there were any team orders, ironically, before this race, and he said, why should there be? I can win the championship just as much as John Reynolds can, and that's a fact.
Well, they certainly, that's great, thank you, Rob. They certainly are going at it, so the team manager, or the team owner, Ben Atkins, must be practically pulling his hair out because the riders can easily bring each other down. And this is Chris Walker. Where is Neil Hodgson? Walker staying tight, as Roger Burnett pointed out earlier in the commentary. He's got to ride defensively. The Shell Oils hairpin, beautifully sunny day. You can see the shadow, hugging the white line. His knee at that point will be just skimming the rumble strip on the inside, just across the grass, 130 miles an hour, braking hard down towards Fulston chicane, and he's found just a little bit extra, I suspect, this time, Roger.
Well, he came alongside here, Chris Walker. This is Island Bend. You really need to be on the the right-hand side of the track to take that corner. It's a very fast corner, 150 miles an hour through there, so no risks to be taken there. And James Hayden goes wide, so Hayden there cut through on John Reynolds and went wide, so that's lost them a little bit of ground on these two leaders. The blue flags are out. The blue flags are out. We've got a slower rider coming through the chicane. And where's James Hayden and John Reynolds? And there they are. So they're line astern still.
Well, blue flags indicating to the tail enders that the fast men are coming through, and that's how quickly they come through. They absolutely rocket past the number 29, Jim Hodgson, the red and yellow Jim Hodgson now, and there he is, just tucking on the back of James Hayden. Again, the blue flags, more tail enders ahead of them. It's Chris Walker with Neil Hodgson. Oh, goodness me, we must not have deja vu here when they come up to Lodge Corner on the last lap. Hodgson surely will remember the episode last time here when he and Chris Walker came together. Very, very hard indeed. Goodness knows how Walker stayed on, but it was a dramatic finish. Walker also very well aware of that. Over the start line he goes again. Two completely different lines. Chris Walker staying tight. Neil Hodgson just sizing up the outside. Away down the outfield goal. Oh, dear me. On the curb, Chris Walker hit some white line there and almost stepped off the Susie.
Well, you were right, Barry. Chris Walker took the tight line. Neil Hodgson had the opportunity then to get alongside. Maybe that just losing the back end on Walker's bike just made Hodgson a little bit cautious. He maybe backed the throttle back a bit and didn't make it through again that time. But this is going to go all the way through to the final lap, and it's anybody's guess who's going to win, to be honest.
Well, John Reynolds now looking very determined in 3rd place. Number 3, John Reynolds, as I said earlier, he knows that having lost that championship lead by just 2 points, however, to Neil Hodgson, he would very much like to get it back. He led the championship from the word go at Brands Hatch, but he sees it fading because the two men at the front have ridden so very hard in the second quarter of the season. He's just had no answer for them. Similarly, his teammate James Hayden has been just a fraction off the winning pace, and Hayden, as I say that, goes up to third again underneath John Reynolds, infuriating the 35-year-old, and Hodgson going for the lead here. He's on the inside. No, not quite at Cascades. Now squirting up towards Island Bend they will go. They've exited Cascades on the last lap. Hayden in third. Hodgson going hard at Island. He's on the outside this time. Riding tightly, Chris Walker. Out they come. Hayden's gone wide. Reynolds in third again. Hugging the white line again, Chris Walker. He can hear that big 1000cc V-twin Ducati booming behind him as the 750 Suzuki 4 screams through Fulstons. Hodgson, Reynolds closer than he's ever been. Maybe just John Reynolds. Talk us through the last 100 yards before we get to the checkered flag. Roger, it's close.
Well, this is down to Knickerbrook. This is one overtaking place, but Hodgson's not close enough there. They now go up over Clay Hill. It's left-handed over here. Then we go into Druids Corner. Keep left, leap left. Now hard on the brakes, down to third gear, 100 miles an hour, knee kissing the tarmac. A big effort out of here is needed if you're going to get alongside Chris Walker to pass him at this corner.
Big wiggles from the Ducati in fourth place. Big wiggles from the Suzuki in the lead. But a wonderfully defensive line from Chris Walker. Has Neil Hodgson's Ducati got the power as they punch over dearly to the flag? It's a wave of the leg for Chris Walker on the Suzuki. Second place for Hodgson. So 25 points go to Walker. He is thrilled. John Reynolds got third. And the Suzuki boss, Paul Denning, could not be more pleased. And Walker celebrates in customary style with a massive burnout. Confirmation of that result. Unbelievable race. Just look how close they all were. Walker got the win. Hayden was fourth. Hislop was fifth. And Toseland a brilliant sixth. And talking of close, it's bunched the table up nicely, but Hodgson, the new championship leader from Reynolds. Walker now has his eyes clearly on the title with that ride, and it was the ride of a lifetime for Chris Walker. He came in with the win, and what a ride it was. We just hope then that Chris Walker has got his breath back.
Chris, I know you were disappointed after race.
Fifth wasn't nearly good enough because it dropped him to second place in the championship on 232 points. Hodgson leads the championship on 234. So the championship leader, number 4, Neil Hodgson, in second place. Steve Hislop there. James Hayden, number 5, in fifth. Race leader, though, Chris Walker must be thinking hard under that helmet. What the dickens do I have to do this time to keep that orange flying machine behind me?
Well, Chris is very good in early parts of races. Not to say he's not
to do that he did in round 13, having to ride absolutely out of his leathers for the first half of the race coming from the back of the grid. He's got away beautifully in second place. It's the number 4 Ducati I'm talking about. And as they head now towards Island Bend, the left-hander, after which will be the steeply banked right-hand Shellows hairpin, it's number 8, Steve Hislop, in third place. There, number 4, Neil Hodgson in second, making fewer mistakes and determined to get a better result this time. Number 3, John Reynolds, and when I said making mistakes, he knows that.
Thank you.
A determined Chris Walker then as we line up for round 14. The starter points to the lights. We're on board with Walker. Now Walker is famous for his lightning starts. Let's see how he's going to do this time. And we're off. This is the rider's eye view down towards Old Hall Corner, and Walker's certainly made the whole shot, closely followed by Neil Hodgson, and Steve Hislop slotted in there third.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see just how hard Neil Hodgson pushes this time, because he hasn't nearly got the same amount of work to
good throughout the whole of the race. However, he specialises in getaway good, and he'll know that Neil Hodgson and co are strongly challenging behind him as they come now down to Lodge Corner. Now, tactics play a part in these races. As Ben Atkins there we see, that's John Reynolds' team owner and Roger Marshall team manager, look curiously at the screen, looking to see where their riders are, and they can learn from these pictures as to the tactics employed by the other riders, and then give their riders messages of how to improve. So, as we come streaming through into Druids Bend, a fabulous sight this for the crowd as they come through. Hislop there on bike number 8, and we're on board now with Chris Walker at the front, and that's the view that he's got. Absolutely nobody ahead of him. This is down to the famous Lodge corner, heavily on the brakes, down to second gear, leaning the bike right over to the right. Mind the back end doesn't step out there. The track drops down a dip, comes through Deer's Leap onto the start and finish. Fourth, fifth gear. Now watch Chris